In a far corner of the galaxy, the Zephyrian Empire ruled with power and pride. Their worlds glowed with silver towers, their ships cut through space like blades of light. No one dared to challenge them, not even the most advanced alien races. But the Empire was slowly breaking inside. War had lasted for years, and peace seemed like a dream lost in smoke. Princess Lyra, daughter of the High Emperor, was known for her beauty and intelligence, but her heart was heavy with the burden of duty. The council told her that to end the war, she must marry a human, the weakest species in the galaxy, the race that had no empire, no fleet, and no power. The decision shocked the court. Many believed it was an insult, a shame to the royal blood, yet the emperor agreed, because the human colonies controlled valuable energy routes that the empire needed for survival. When the human delegation arrived, the Zephyrians stared in silence. Their ships were small, old, and dull compared to the shining crafts of the empire. And among them walked the man who would marry the princess, Captain Daniel Hayes. Leader of the human alliance, he looked ordinary, dressed in a plain uniform, no glowing armor, no body marks of power. But there was something in his eyes, something deep and calm, like a storm hiding beneath still water. The royal court laughed quietly when he entered the great hall. They whispered that the princess was marrying a creature of dust and weakness. But Lyra said nothing. She stood beside him, tall and proud, her silver crown shining under the blue light of the throne. When Daniel bowed, his movements were respectful but not submissive. He met the emperor's gaze without fear, and for a brief second, the air in the hall felt heavier. Even the emperor blinked as if he sensed something powerful but could not name it. The marriage ceremony was grand but cold. The crowd cheered with forced smiles, and when Lyra placed her hand in Daniel's, she felt a strange warmth. It wasn't like the usual bioenergy that flowed through alien beings. It was different, raw and pure, like the pulse of a living star. Her fingers trembled for a moment, and she quickly looked away. After the wedding, Daniel was given a small residence near the royal gardens. He spoke little, always polite but distant. He spent hours watching the alien sky as if searching for something he had lost. Lyra tried to understand him, but he remained a mystery. One night, she found him standing outside staring at the twin moons. She asked him if he missed Earth. He smiled slightly and said, "I miss what we were." His tone was soft but filled with memories she could not grasp. The next day, the Empire's military leaders met in secret. They complained that a human had no place among the royals. General Kor, a tall warrior with crimson skin, said the marriage was a sign of weakness. He warned that humans were unpredictable, that they might have hidden motives, but none of them truly feared humans. They feared what Daniel represented, the unknown. As days passed, strange things began to happen around the palace. The security systems glitched for seconds whenever Daniel walked by. Energy sensors spiked randomly near his quarters. Even the plants in the royal garden seemed to grow faster where he stood. Lyra noticed it all but kept silent deep inside. She felt both curiosity and unease. One evening, during a diplomatic feast, a Zephyrian noble mocked Daniel openly. He called humans dust that learned to walk. The hall burst into laughter. Daniel did not reply. He simply raised his glass and smiled. But the noble suddenly froze. His glass shattered in his hand, and the air around him vibrated like thunder. For a moment, everyone thought the palace shields had activated. Then it was gone. The noble sat down, pale and shaking, unable to speak. Daniel quietly left the hall, leaving whispers behind him. That night, Lyra followed him, her silver cloak blending with the shadows. She saw him walk to a quiet valley behind the palace. The moonlight touched his face, and she saw his eyes glowing faintly. He lifted his hand, and a wave of light spread across the air, forming shapes and symbols she didn't recognize. It looked like human writing mixed with alien energy. She gasped softly, but Daniel turned toward her, calm as ever. "Curiosity can be dangerous, princess," he said gently. Lyra stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Who are you really?" Daniel smiled, the kind of smile that hides 1,000 stories. "I am what your empire forgot existed," he said. Before she could speak again, the ground trembled slightly, a low rumble that faded as quickly as it came. Daniel looked at the sky and whispered, "It begins again." The next morning, Lyra tried to tell her father about the strange events, but before she could, a massive energy wave was detected near the outer colonies. The council rushed to analyze it, claiming it might be a new weapon. Daniel listened quietly during the meeting, his eyes thoughtful. When they asked for volunteers to investigate, he raised his hand first. The generals protested, but the Emperor allowed it. He said, "If this alliance is to mean anything, let the human prove his worth." As Daniel left the chamber, Lyra caught his gaze. There was something in his expression, sadness mixed with purpose, and for the first time she wondered if marrying him had not saved her people, but awakened something ancient and unstoppable. The stars outside glowed brighter that night, and deep within those stars, something old stirred awake, watching, waiting, remembering the name of humanity. Days passed quietly after the strange energy wave was detected. The royal scientists could not explain it. They said it came from deep space, but no one knew the source. Daniel had already left for the investigation mission, taking a small ship and a few Zephyrian officers. Lyra stood on the palace balcony and watched the stars. Wondering where he was, she didn't know why, but she felt a strange pull, as if a part of her followed him through the dark, far away. Daniel's ship reached the edge of a dying system. Ruins floated in space, remains of an ancient battlefield. The air was filled with radiation and broken metal. The Zephyrian officers moved carefully, scanning for signs of energy. But Daniel walked ahead, silent and calm. He seemed to know where to go, as if something unseen was guiding him. He stopped near a large fragment of a destroyed station. It was covered in alien writing so old even Zephyrian scanners couldn't read it. Daniel placed his hand on the cold metal. A flash of blue light spread from his fingers. The symbols lit up one by one. The officers gasped, their scanners going wild. "Step back," Daniel said quietly, his voice calm but commanding. A portal of pure energy opened, humming like thunder trapped in glass. Through it, a deep voice echoed, not human, not alien, something beyond both. "Welcome back, protector of Earth," it said. Daniel's eyes glowed for a second, and then everything went silent again. When he returned to the ship, he said nothing. The officers tried to question him, but he only told them the system was unstable and they needed to leave. When they came back to the capital, reports said Daniel had successfully stabilized the region, but Lyra saw something different in him when he returned. His eyes seemed heavier, his presence stronger. The guards near him felt strange and as if time slowed when he passed by. That night, Lyra decided to confront him. She entered his chamber quietly, finding him sitting alone, his hands glowing faintly. "What are you?" she asked, her voice low but firm. Daniel didn't look surprised. "I am human," he said simply. "Humans can't do what you did," Lyra whispered. Daniel looked up, his expression unreadable. "Once we couldn't," he said. "But long ago, before your empire even existed, humans were different." He stood up slowly, the air around him vibrating softly. "We fought something the stars themselves feared," he continued. "And when it ended, we sealed our power away, so we could live in peace." Lyra's heart pounded. She didn't know if she should believe him. "Then why are you here?" she asked. "Because your empire broke the seal," Daniel said. "Your wars, your weapons, your greed. They woke something ancient, something that remembers humanity." His voice grew quiet. "And now it remembers me." Before she could reply, alarms echoed across the palace. A sudden explosion shook the walls. The Zephyrian guards shouted. An assassination squad had entered the royal grounds. Lyra and Daniel ran through the corridor, lights flashing red. When the first assassin appeared, Daniel stopped. "Stay behind me," he said softly. Lyra saw him raise his hand, and a bright wave of energy burst from his palm. The attackers were thrown back, armor melting like wax. The air smelled of burning ozone. Daniel's eyes were no longer human. They glowed with golden light. The guards who saw it froze in shock. Some whispered, "He's not human." But Daniel didn't listen. He lifted one of the fallen assassins and asked, "Who sent you?" The alien trembled, barely able to speak. "The council," he gasped. "They said you are a danger." "A curse," Daniel dropped him gently. He turned to Lyra, his voice steady. "I told you, princess. Curiosity can be dangerous." Later that night, the council gathered again. They blamed Daniel for the attack, saying his presence caused chaos, but the emperor defended him, saying Daniel saved the royal family. Still, whispers spread through the empire. People spoke of a human who burned assassins with his hands, a man who walked like a god among them. And in dark corners, generals planned their next move. They could not allow a human to become more powerful than their own warriors. Lyra couldn't sleep that night. She went to the Royal Observatory and looked at the stars. In her heart she felt fear and something else. Admiration. Daniel was unlike anyone she had ever met. He was calm, kind, and yet filled with power that made the universe tremble. She remembered his words, "I protect what I love." What did he mean by that? She wondered, was it her? Was it humanity? Or something much larger? At dawn, she found him standing outside again, watching the rising suns. The light touched his face, and for a moment he looked peaceful. "Do you ever rest?" she asked softly. Daniel smiled faintly. "Not while the stars remember what we once were," he said. Lyra looked at him confused. "What do you mean?" Daniel turned toward her, his eyes filled with both sadness and strength. "The galaxy has forgotten fear," he said quietly. "But soon it will remember." The wind blew gently, carrying the scent of the alien gardens. Lyra stood beside him, her thoughts racing. She knew now that her marriage was more than a political act. It was the beginning of something far greater, something that could change the balance of the entire galaxy. And somewhere deep in the void, something ancient stirred again, awakening from its long sleep. Sensing that the protector of Earth had returned, the stars shimmered faintly as if they were watching, waiting for what would come next, and in that silence, the universe itself seemed to hold its breath. The Empire had grown silent after the assassination attempt. Rumors spread faster than light. Some said the human had used forbidden weapons. Others whispered he was a spirit from the old wars. But no one could explain how a man with no armor, no implant, and no royal blood had defeated trained killers. The Emperor ordered a full investigation, but Daniel said nothing. He only asked to serve as an advisor for planetary defense. Lyra supported him, believing his strength could protect the Empire. Yet deep inside, she feared what he truly was every night. She dreamed of a burning sky, and in the center of it Daniel stood alone, glowing like a star that refused to die. Weeks passed, and tension grew between the Zephyrian generals. General Kor, the one who hated Daniel the most, gathered soldiers in secret. He wanted proof that the human was a danger. "If he bleeds, he can die," Kor told his men coldly. And so one dark evening they set a trap. Daniel was walking alone through the lower city. He liked to walk among the people, silent and unseen. He watched the alien markets, the children playing, the stars reflecting on glass towers. For the first time in years he felt peace. But peace never lasts long for men like him. Without warning, the sky above the city turned red. A squad of armored soldiers appeared. Dropping from stealth ships, they surrounded him, weapons humming with deadly energy. "By order of the High Council," one shouted, "you are under arrest for treason against the Empire." Daniel looked at them quietly. He could have spoken, explained, begged, but instead he sighed softly. "I warned them," he whispered. And then the world changed. The soldiers fired, bright plasma bolts cutting through the air. But before the first shot reached him, Daniel moved. He didn't run. He simply vanished in the next instant. He stood behind them, untouched. The ground beneath him cracked, energy rippling out like a heartbeat. One by one, the soldiers fell, their weapons crushed by invisible force. His eyes glowed gold, then white. The city lights flickered as if afraid. General Kor himself landed from his warship. His armor shone like burning steel, his weapon forged from the Empire's strongest crystal. He faced Daniel and smiled. "So the stories are true," Kor said. "You are not human." Daniel looked at him, calm and silent. "I am more human than you will ever understand," he said quietly. Kor attacked with fury, blades of plasma swinging through the air. But Daniel moved faster, each strike passing through afterimages. He caught the general's blade in his bare hand, crushing it like sand. Kor's eyes widened in disbelief. "What are you?" he shouted. Daniel's voice grew deeper, almost ancient. "I am what humanity became when gods tried to break us." Energy erupted around him. The city trembled. Buildings cracked, alarms screamed across the capital. Lyra saw the explosion from her tower and ran toward the chaos. The sky above was filled with golden light, swirling like a living storm. When she reached the lower city, she saw Daniel standing in the center of a crater. The soldiers lay unconscious around him, their armor melted into the ground. Daniel's body glowed faintly, his breath steady, his eyes calm. Lyra stepped closer, her heart racing. "What have you done?" she whispered. Daniel turned toward her. "What I always do," he said. I survived. The council was furious. They demanded Daniel be exiled or executed, but the emperor refused. He saved this city, the emperor said, and without him, the empire might already be dust. Still, fear spread among the nobles. They began to call him the unseen warrior, the man who fought without moving, the storm in human skin and in the darkness of space. Other species began to take notice. Old enemies of the empire whispered, "The humans have returned." That night, Lyra went to Daniel again. He was standing in the royal garden, the stars reflecting in his eyes. "You can't hide anymore," she said softly. Daniel smiled faintly. "I never tried to hide," he replied. "I tried to forget." Lyra looked at him confused. "Forget what?" He turned toward her slowly. "The war that ended before your stars were born," he said. "There was a time when gods ruled the skies and we, humans, fought them." His voice was low but full of memory. "We were small, weak, but we never gave up, and in the end, we broke them." He looked up at the stars. "But breaking gods comes with a price," Lyra's voice trembled. "What price?" Daniel's eyes dimmed. "Our humanity," he said quietly. "And now it wants it back." A cold wind passed through the garden. The moonlight flickered. Shadows moved like ghosts. Lyra felt a shiver crawl through her spine. It was no longer just about politics or alliances. Something much greater was unfolding. Something that reached beyond their galaxies. Beyond time itself, far away, deep in space, sensors across multiple empires detected a signal. It was ancient, powerful, and unmistakably human. It pulsed like a heartbeat echoing through the void. Every race that heard it felt the same chill. The humans had awakened something old. Something that even the stars feared to remember. And in the heart of the Zephyrian Empire, Daniel stood silently, his hands folded behind his back. His face calm, but his eyes burned like suns. He could feel it too. The call of war. The silence before the storm that would change everything. The galaxy trembled in silence. The signal had reached every empire. Every corner of known space, it carried no words. Only a pulse. Deep, rhythmic, powerful. It was like a heartbeat echoing through the void. And with it came fear, ancient and forgotten. The Zephyrian Council gathered in panic. Reports came from border worlds. Strange lights, unknown ships, stars blinking out for seconds and returning dimmer. Something was coming, and no one knew what. The Emperor demanded answers. But no one could explain, only Daniel stood calm, watching the holomap as red dots spread like blood through the stars. "They have awakened," he said quietly. Everyone turned to him confused. "Who has awakened?" the Emperor asked. Daniel's eyes reflected the map's light. "The ones who once called themselves gods," he said. "And the ones we buried long ago." The room fell silent. Lyra stared at him, her heart pounding. "Are you saying they were real?" she asked. Daniel nodded slowly. "They were real, and they never forgave us." A few days later, the first attacks began. Outer colonies vanished without distress calls. Ships disappeared between jump routes and across the stars. A shadow fleet appeared, vessels of impossible design, built from living metal and burning energy. Every empire that faced them was erased in hours, until finally the Zephyrian Empire became their next target. Daniel stood in the war chamber as alarms echoed across the palace. The fleet was ready, thousands of ships, the pride of the empire, but Daniel shook his head. "They will not be enough," he said softly. The generals glared at him. "You doubt our power, human?" One shouted. Daniel looked at him calmly. "I don't doubt your courage," he said. "I doubt your understanding of what's coming." When the alien fleet entered the system, the stars turned red. The sky above the capital dimmed as if swallowed by darkness itself. Lyra watched from the command deck, her voice trembling. "Daniel, what do we do?" He looked out at the endless storm of ships and whispered, "We remind the universe why humans were feared." He walked to the center of the bridge, his body glowing faintly. "Open the old frequencies," he ordered. The officers hesitated. "Those are sealed since the First War," one said. Daniel smiled faintly. "I know," he replied. "I was there." The air filled with a strange humming. Old human signals lost for millennia burst across the channels. It wasn't words. It was a call. A code older than language, far away, beyond the edge of known space. Something responded. Old human war machines, buried and forgotten, woke from their slumber. Massive ships built from light and gravity rose from the dark. Their cores pulsed with ancient human power, pure energy and memory combined. The Zephyrian officers watched in awe as the scanners lit up. Thousands of old human vessels appeared on the radar. "They're answering," Lyra whispered. Daniel nodded slowly. "They never died," he said. "They just waited for the signal." The alien god's fleet advanced, tearing through everything in their path. The Zephyrian ships fired, but their weapons barely scratched the enemy shields. Then Daniel's ships joined the battle. Their weapons didn't fire beam, they released energy waves that bent reality itself. Whole sections of the enemy fleet vanished into light. The void exploded in storms of color and destruction. Daniel stood still, his hands behind his back, eyes glowing faintly. He was connected to every human ship through thought and memory. He felt every pulse, every movement, every scream. And for a moment, he became something more than human again. The Starborn, the protector of Earth, the weapon that once destroyed gods. Lyra watched him in awe. He stood like a statue of light, unshaken by the chaos outside. "Is this what you really are?" she whispered. Daniel turned his head slightly, his voice soft. "No, this is what we became when we had no choice." The battle lasted for hours. The sky burned with color. Whole planets trembled from the energy waves. But the human fleet, Daniel's fleet, began to push the enemy back. For the first time in ages, the gods retreated. The galaxy watched in silence as the impossible happened. When the final ship vanished into the void, the Zephyrian soldiers cheered. The Empire was safe, for now. But Daniel did not celebrate. He looked at the dark space where the enemy disappeared. "They will return," he said quietly, "and next time, they won't come alone." Later that night, Daniel stood alone on the palace balcony. The stars flickered weakly, scarred from battle. Lyra approached him quietly. "You saved us," she said softly. Daniel didn't look at her. "I delayed the end," he replied. Lyra frowned. "What do you mean?" He turned toward her slowly, his eyes dimmed with sadness. "When you fight gods," he said, "the war never truly ends." She placed her hand on his arm. "You don't have to face it alone," she said. Daniel smiled faintly, a rare warmth in his voice. "I never did," he whispered, looking at the stars. "They're always watching," as he spoke. The sky shimmered faintly across distant worlds. Human monuments began to glow. Ancient voices whispered through time. Awakening again, the galaxy didn't know it yet. But the old war, the War of Stars, had begun once more, and this time, the gods were not the only ones returning. The galaxy had gone quiet after the great battle. Stars flickered weakly, their light dimmed by the scars of war. Worlds rebuilt, fleets repaired, and empires whispered of peace. But Daniel knew peace was only an illusion. He could feel it in the stars, the silence before another storm. He spent days alone in the old observatory. The room was filled with ancient maps, data cores, and fragments of human relics. Lyra often visited him, bringing food and asking questions. But Daniel always smiled softly and said the same thing. Not yet. He was waiting for something he hadn't told anyone about. One night, as the twin moons crossed the sky, the universe changed again. The stars dimmed all at once, and every communication system in the galaxy went dark. Alarms blared through the Zephyrian capital. Lyra ran to the command deck, her voice shaking. "What's happening?" she cried. An officer looked up, terrified. "Something massive is coming out of the void," he said. "Bigger than any fleet we've ever seen." And then it appeared, a colossal ship made of living light and shadow. Larger than a planet, it moved without sound. Absorbing the energy around it, it was the Ascendant, the last of the god ships, the weapon of the ancient deities. Whole systems trembled as it entered their space. Every star nearby began to flicker and fade. Its power was beyond anything the galaxy had ever faced. Daniel entered the command deck, calm as ever, but his eyes glowed faintly, golden and sad. He looked at the hologram of the god ship and whispered, "They finally came themselves." Lyra turned toward him, fear and hope mixing in her eyes. "What do we do?" she asked. Daniel looked at her gently. "You prepare to live," he said quietly. "I will handle the rest." Before anyone could stop him, he walked to the teleport bay. The Emperor shouted his name. Lyra ran after him. "Daniel, you can't fight that alone," she cried. He turned to her with a faint smile. "Alone?" he said softly. "I never fight alone." He stepped into the beam and vanished. leaving only light behind moments later. Daniel appeared in open space, floating before the massive godship. He looked small, fragile, human, but then the stars around him began to bend. His body glowed brighter, lines of energy tracing across his skin. The ship fired first, a beam of power large enough to erase planets. The impact never reached him. Daniel raised his hand and space itself folded, swallowing the blast into nothingness. Then he whispered a single word, "Enough." The godship trembled, its hull cracking under invisible pressure. Voices echoed through the stars, the voices of the old gods. "You cannot destroy us again." "Human," they thundered. Daniel's eyes turned white, his voice calm but endless. "I am not here to destroy," he said. "I am here to end." He reached out, his energy connecting to the godship for a moment. Every star across the galaxy flared at once. People looked to the sky and saw a human shape surrounded by fire and light. The Zephyrian soldiers fell silent. Lyra watched from the palace balcony, tears in her eyes. "Please come back," she whispered. Inside the storm of energy, Daniel saw visions, Earth as it once was, the oceans, the laughter, the sky. He remembered what it meant to be human, to love, to lose, to dream. And in that final memory he smiled. Then he let go. The godship exploded into pure light, brighter than 1,000 suns. The shockwave swept across galaxies, but instead of destruction, it brought life. Dead stars reignited, barren worlds bloomed with energy. Every race that survived felt a warmth deep inside, hope, and in the heart of it all, Daniel was gone. When the light faded, only silence remained. The war was over, the gods were no more. Lyra stood in the quiet garden days later. The sky was clear, the stars brighter than ever before. She felt the wind move gently through the flowers, and for a moment she heard his voice. "I am always watching," it whispered. She looked up, smiling through tears. "He wasn't just human," she said softly. "He was hope." From that day, every world in the galaxy told the same story. The story of a man who married an alien princess for peace, who became a legend, a myth, a light among stars. They called him the warrior god, but those who truly knew him remembered him by another name, Daniel Hayes, the human who reminded the universe what it meant to be alive. And so the stars continued to burn, brighter, warmer, and full of memory, because somewhere beyond time, the warrior god still watched, waiting, protecting, and whispering through the light. Humanity never ends.